On June 1, 2026, the FIA changes how it measures engine compression ratios in Formula One. That single date is the reason 4 rival engine makers spent months pushing back. Toto Wolff spent weeks defending his power unit, and Ferrari has built its entire mid-season recovery plan around a 14-day window between Canada and Monaco. That was supposed to be months away. It is now 2 weeks out, and Mercedes' 70-point championship lead is about to face 3 threats at the same time that it cannot outrun with straight-line speed alone. How do you attack a team that has won 3 of the first 4 races in 2026? A team that just put the first driver in Formula One history to win his opening 3 Grands Prix from 3 back-to-back pole positions into the W17. Kimi Antonelli is rewriting the record books at Mercedes. Not even Ayrton Senna or Michael Schumacher managed 3 wins in a row from 3 poles in a row at the start of their careers. You do not try to outrun that on track. You change what the word faster actually means. And right now, across 3 separate fronts, that is exactly what is happening to Mercedes. One front is a rule change. One front is aero. One front is a system buried in the 2026 engine rules that barely anyone outside the paddock has heard of. All 3 land in the same 14-day window. And none of them need Ferrari to build a faster car to take effect. The first front is the power unit. Since the start of 2026, rival engine makers have accused Mercedes of using a gap in how the FIA tests compression ratios. The rules are clear. Article C 5.4.3 of the technical rules caps the compression ratio at 16:1. Every engine on the grid has to meet that number when tested. Mercedes passes every time. The accusation from rival teams is about what happens after the test is done. At room temperature, in a cold engine, the Mercedes power unit reads under 16:1, fully legal, no dispute. The problem is what happens when the engine reaches full racing temperature on track. Parts inside the cylinder are said to expand under heat in a way that pushes the real compression ratio upward, closer to 18:1. That was the limit under the old rules. If the claim is true, Mercedes pulls much more power out of its engine than the 16:1 cap was meant to allow. The size of the edge depends on who is doing the maths. Rival guesses range from 10 to 30 extra brake horsepower, roughly 0.2 to 0.3 seconds per lap. Mercedes insists the real number is closer to 2 or 3 brake horsepower. The FIA's own view falls somewhere in between, with the governing body's single-seater chief publicly calling the larger claims wildly overblown. 4 different camps. 4 different numbers. Somewhere in that range is the truth, and exactly where it sits decides how much the June 1st change actually costs Mercedes. What matters most is what happened behind closed doors at the FIA. In late February, the FIA held a vote among all 5 engine makers and the World Motorsport Council. Every vote went the same way. Article C 5.4.3 was changed with 2 new rules. From June 1st through the end of 2026, the compression ratio must be tested both at room temperature and at 130 degrees Celsius. The rule also added a clear ban. Any part, setup or system that is designed to raise the compression ratio above 16 under racing conditions is now against the rules. From 2027, the cold check goes away for good. Only the hot test stays. The Canadian Grand Prix on May 24th is the last race run under the old single test. Monaco on June 7th is the first race where both tests apply. Whatever edge Mercedes currently gets from passing only the cold test, that edge has an expiry date on it. Keep that date in your head. June 1st, it comes back. That is the first front. There are 2 more. The second front is aero, and this one traces back to Lewis Hamilton saying something his own engineers did not want said out loud. The Miami Grand Prix was supposed to be Ferrari's upgrade moment. 11 new parts on the SF26. New floor shape, revised rear wing end plates, updated front wing pieces. The Maranello wind tunnel had shown strong gains across every measure, and the April filming day at Monza, where Leclerc and Hamilton split the FIA's 200-kilometer limit, showed the data was matching reality. The parts worked as planned. Then the race happened. Mercedes won. McLaren took 2nd and 4th. Ferrari finished 5th and 7th, with Hamilton taking the higher spot after Leclerc picked up a post-race penalty. Hamilton himself took first lap damage in a crash with Franco Colapinto that hurt his race. 11 new parts on the car, contact on lap 1, and the race pace gap to Mercedes had barely shrunk. The gap in the Constructors' Championship after Miami sits at 70 points. Ferrari trails at 110 to Mercedes 180. Hamilton's post-race words landed hard inside the Maranello tech office. Mercedes, McLaren, and Red Bull are all running a completely different front-wing approach compared to Ferrari. When asked whether the gap comes from the 2026 active aero modes or the core wing design, Hamilton was direct. Concept, I think. If you just look at everyone else's wing and look at us, you'll see it looks different. That is not a driver moaning about setup or balance. That is a 7-time world champion telling his team that the base of their aero platform needs rethinking. At Ferrari, in his second year with the team. On camera, outside expert review backed up exactly what Hamilton was pointing at. The SF26 is missing a key part that every other fast car on the grid runs. A small outer blade on the front wing end plate, a diveplane, that helps steer airflow around the front tyre. Mercedes, McLaren and Red Bull all have one. Ferrari does not. The Ferrari front wing is, by most expert views, the simplest on the grid. And that simpleness is leaving speed on the table. There is also a straight-line speed problem. Ferrari is losing 3 to 4 tenths on the straights compared to Mercedes, which on a power track like Montreal adds up across a full race. The team needs to cut drag before Canada, and the current wing design is part of the reason the drag exists. Hamilton also flagged the team's entire prep process as part of the problem, planning a different approach for future race weekends. A 7-time champion telling his new team that the way they get ready for races is not working. At almost any other team on the grid, that would cause a political crisis. At Ferrari, in the middle of a development war, it appears to be causing a tech response instead. The clock was already ticking. Ferrari just could not hear it yet. Ferrari is bringing more upgrades to Canada. The details are not yet public. The FIA's official upgrade list drops on Friday of the Canadian Grand Prix weekend. Mercedes is also bringing a big package. A new front wing, revised airflow paths around the front suspension covers and underbody, a lighter gearbox built to push the W17 closer to the 768 kilogram minimum weight, and most importantly, new start software and clutch settings. The Mercedes start problem is not a side note, it is a crisis hiding inside a winning streak. Kimi Antonelli has lost 26 grid spots off the start line across the first 4 Grand Prix and 2 sprint races of 2026. 26 places dropped before turn 1, traced to wrong clutch targets and turbo lag causing wheel spin at launch. The team's Canada upgrade package includes a software fix built to solve this. Antonelli has won 3 of 4 races, despite giving up an average of 6.5 places at every single start. If Mercedes fixes that, the gap to every other team on the grid gets larger, not smaller. The front wing is the visible fight. The third front is the one that could reshape the entire championship. ADUO, additional development and upgrade opportunities. It is the FIA's engine catch-up system for the 2026 rules, and it might be the most important 4 letters in Formula One this season. The 2026 power unit rules freeze engine designs at the start of the year. Once your engine is locked in and approved, you cannot change it during the season. That is the base rule. Every engine maker starts the year frozen. ADUO is the exception built into that system for teams that fall behind. The FIA tracks each engine's speed through something called the ICE Performance Index. It combines engine torque, engine revs, MG/UK power output, and a lap time weighting model. It strips out aero on purpose. The reading is engine against engine, with nothing else blurring the picture. The season is split into review windows. After both the Bahrain and Saudi Arabian rounds were dropped, Window 1 was adjusted to cover the first 5 race weekends: Australia, China, Japan, Miami, and Canada. Once the Canadian Grand Prix ends, the FIA works out each engine maker's gap to the best engine on the grid. The tiers decide what happens next. An engine maker between 2 and 4% behind gets 1 extra upgrade in 2026, 1 more in 2027, and roughly $3 million in cost cap relief. An engine maker 4% or more behind gets 2 upgrades per season and roughly $4.65 million in extra budget. The bands go up to 10% for those in deeper trouble. This is the detail the championship hinges on. Ferrari is widely expected to qualify. The Ferrari engine gap sits at around 20 to 30 brake horsepower behind the Mercedes power unit. Whether Ferrari lands in the 2% band, which grants 1 upgrade, or the 4% band, which grants 2, is the single biggest ruling the FIA will make this summer. 1 upgrade can close a gap. 2 upgrades in the same season can flip an engine pecking order entirely. And the upgrades are not limited to the main engine alone. The system covers the turbo, exhaust, energy recovery parts, cooling, the MGUK, and selected electronic and hydraulic systems. A team granted 2 upgrades gets to redesign major chunks of the entire power unit mid-season, with extra money to pay for the work. The FIA's timeline is clear. The Window 1 results are due no later than 2 weeks after the Canadian Grand Prix. That places the ruling on or around the Monaco Grand Prix weekend, June 5th through 7th. The FIA has been careful to frame ADUO as a cost cap relief tool, not a way to balance speed between teams. It is meant to give struggling engine makers a chance to work their way closer to the front, not to close the gap overnight. That difference matters because it shapes how freely the FIA grants the higher tiers. Inside Maranello, the picture looks different. Ferrari's internal budget targets are already built around reaching the 4% ADUO tier, meaning the team has planned and set aside money for 2 mid-season engine upgrades, not 1. Mercedes sees it coming. Wolff has publicly demanded that any ADUO choices be made with total precision, clarity, and openness, warning that gamesmanship has no place in the process. And then came the line that cuts through every polite layer. ADUO was always meant as a catch-up mechanism and not as a leapfrog mechanism. That is a team boss with a 70-point championship lead, the fastest car on the grid, and a record-breaking rookie driver, publicly pushing the FIA to limit how much development freedom his closest rival gets. Teams that feel safe do not do that. If you are tracking the 2026 development war, hit subscribe. We cover every upgrade, every rule shift, and every tech fight as it unfolds. All right. So here is where things get messy. Because none of these 3 fronts exist on their own. They are closing in on the same 14-day window, and the order matters. Mercedes is not standing still. The Canada upgrade is the team's first major aero package of 2026, and Brackley has made the stakes clear. Rivals took a step forward in Miami, and Mercedes needs to answer. The first upgrade of the year heads to Montreal, but there is a warning built into the message that upgrades do not always deliver on track what they promise in the wind tunnel. Sometimes the stopwatch says something different. That warning matters, because the Canada weekend is a risky bet for Brackley. If the new front wing and underbody package hit their marks and the car gets clearly faster, Mercedes buys breathing room heading into Monaco. If the parts fail to work on track, Mercedes enters the first race under the new compression ratio test with no aero step forward and a possibly weaker engine. That is the worst outcome for a team that has built its championship spot partly on engine power. And there is a detail hidden in the calendar that makes this worse. The 2026 schedule packs 7 Grand Prix into 10 weekends between now and the summer break. 7 races in 10 weekends is a brutal sprint. A team with a working upgrade path can stack gains across 7 races. A team whose upgrades fail to match on track gets stuck with the bad parts for weeks because there is no time to redesign between rounds. The cost cap limits how many shots you get. Miss once, and the gap grows in the wrong direction. Mercedes celebrated after Miami. They should not have. And there is a counterpoint worth tracking on the compression ratio story itself. 4 teams run the Mercedes engine in 2026: Mercedes, McLaren, Williams, and Alpine. If the compression ratio trick were truly worth 0.3 seconds a lap, all 4 of those teams should be fighting at the front of the grid. They are not. Williams and Alpine are nowhere near the podium. McLaren is fast, but not on the same level as Mercedes. The whole saga has been called a storm in a cylinder, and there is some truth to that. If the trick were as big as the largest guesses suggest, every Mercedes-powered car would be running away with it. That is clearly not the case. That does not mean the June 1st change is pointless. It means the real edge might be a 10th, not 3 tenths. In a championship where qualifying gaps between 2nd and 5th are often under 2 tenths, even a small drop in engine speed reshapes who fights for poles and who fights for points. Here is the timeline. May 22nd through 24th. The Canadian Grand Prix. Both Ferrari and Mercedes roll out major upgrade packages. Antonelli's start software gets its first live test. This is the last race under the old compression ratio test. ADUO review window 1 ends. The FIA's upgrade list comes out on Friday, confirming exactly what each team is bringing. June 1st. The new compression ratio test kicks in, both room temperature and 130 degrees Celsius. Whatever Mercedes has been pulling from the single temperature test, it is now visible to the FIA under real racing conditions. June 5th through 7th, the Monaco Grand Prix, first race under the tighter engine test. The ADUO Window 1 ruling is expected on or around this weekend. Charles Leclerc's home race. Lewis Hamilton's 7 wins at Monaco, making it one of his best tracks. And for Ferrari, the weekend where both the engine test change and the ADUO ruling land at the same time. If Ferrari qualifies for the 4% ADUO tier, the earliest they could bring an engine upgrade is the Spanish Grand Prix on June 14th, or the Austrian Grand Prix on June 28th. That means by late June, Ferrari could be racing with a reworked power unit, while Mercedes races with a possibly weaker one. The speed picture flips from Mercedes pulling away to Mercedes defending. And here is the part nobody is working out yet. If the compression ratio test costs Mercedes even 5 brake horsepower, and Ferrari's first ADUO upgrade adds 10 to 15 brake horsepower, the net swing is 15 to 20 brake horsepower. At roughly 1 second per 30 horsepower, that is somewhere between 0.3 and 0.5 seconds per lap changing hands. On a grid where the top 5 are split by half a second, that is not a fix. That is a new pecking order. 70 points across 20 remaining races works out to 3.5 points per weekend. One bad retirement wipes out 5 weekends of built-up margin. 2 retirements and a single Ferrari 1-2, and the Constructors' Championship is level. No team in Formula One history has faced this exact mix of pressures, closing in at this stage of a season. A rule change targeting the leading engine. An FIA catch-up system about to grant the second-place team extra development chances. And an aero upgrade war where both teams are betting that their new parts match real-world speed on a track neither has raced at yet this year. Mercedes built this championship lead with the best car, the best rookie in a generation, and an engine that passed every test the FIA put in front of it. 2 of those 3 edges are about to be tested by forces that have nothing to do with what happens on track. The real question is not whether Mercedes survives Canada. They almost certainly do. The real question is whether the championship they are winning in May is the same championship they will be fighting in July. If Ferrari gets 2 ADUO engine upgrades, fixes the front wing design, Hamilton called out, and the compression ratio test costs Mercedes even a 10th per lap, those 70 points start shrinking. And Toto Wolff, for all his confidence at the W17 launch, already sounds like a man who can feel the ground shifting underneath him. If you want to see how the Canada upgrade battle plays out, that video is on screen when it drops.